Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. Thanks, everybody. Let us go on in these days of study and analysis on the genius of the Republic and on this encounter with the others, which is very much in line with the title of this year's meeting, under the title, You Are a Good for Me. We're going to make a thorough analysis on a particular aspect this 70 years, that is to say, international politics. Today we're going to verify whether the style that is conveyed and transferred by the title of the meeting, You Are Good for Me, can be applied to the world and to international relations. We are supported in this analysis by Ambassador Michele Valensise, who is with us today. I'm going to briefly talk about his 40-year-long experience representing our country in this world. He joined the diplomatic career in 1975. He first worked as at the General Directorate for Economic Affairs of the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. In 1978, he worked in Brasilia, in the Italian Embassy in Brasilia. In 1981, he then worked in the Italian Embassy in Bonn. From 1984 to 87, so during the Lebanese civil war, he was advisor of the Italian Embassy in Beirut. When he came back to Rome from 87 to 91, he was the head of the deputies of the Secretariat of the Deputy Secretary Susanna Agnelli. He then went to Brussels from 1991 to 97, working for the Italian representation at the European Union and dealt with relations with Mediterranean and Balkan countries. And then in 1970 he was sent to Sarajevo as an ambassador of Italy for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Hostilities had just finished in that year, and therefore he could directly experience what took place. He was then the minister, head of cabinet of the Dini minister. He was then the speaker of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and then from 2004 to 2009 he was ambassador in Italy and in Brazil. In 2009 he was Italian ambassador in Berlin. From July 2012 to March this year, he was Secretary General of our Ministry for Foreign Affairs. 41 years diplomatic service. Now he's engaged in building bridges elsewhere. He's the Vice President of Astaldi SPA, which is one of the most important Italian international general contractors. So Ambassador Valensise has somehow seen the world and seen Italy in the world over the last 41 years. And now I'd like to leave you the floor by posing you this question. There's this style, the style of you are a good for me. This style, do you think this style has characterized also the 41 years of the Italian Republic? Do you think that the Italian Republic has served this method or not? Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Massimo Bernardini. Thanks to the organizers of this wonderful meeting. I'm very happy to be here, to be back here after 1 year, even if I am now engaged in different things compared to last year. In spring this year, when I was invited by the organizers of the meeting when they invited me to participate in one of your sessions, I, for the sake of information, I had to tell them that this spring I had abandoned my office, that I changed job, and maybe that it would have been more appropriate for them to invite someone else instead of me. But I did wrong because the organizers were so ready to tell me, no, that's perfect. You'll come, you can come, because this way you'll speak in more freedom, because you're no longer the director of the secretary director of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. So that's why I'm going to speak very freely, speaking only on my behalf. However, always taking reference to the work that I carried out for many years with great satisfaction and with enormous passion, as Mr. Bernardini reminded us all. If we want to focus on foreign politics, I think it is important to make things clear. In other words, we should not consider foreign politics as something which is detached from our daily activity or our national domestic life. Foreign politics and internal politics over the last 70 years of our republic have been very closely interrelated. One can therefore reasonably talk well about foreign politics by linking it to the development of our domestic policy and domestic life. I have just arrived here in Rimini and I've just seen the beautiful exhibition on the 70 years of the Italian Republic, which is organized here. And I was amazed by the beautiful videos and pictures and by the topical messages shown in the exhibition. Just by way of example, in order to show how strong the link between foreign politics and internal politics is, I was very much struck by an element in the first session of the exhibition. It is really worth visiting. So in the first session of the exhibition, there is a recording of a speech, of an extract of a speech by Alcide De Gasperi in 1949, when Italy joined the NATO. So Italy officially joined the NATO in 1949. The then Prime Minister Alcide De Gasperi had to explain the extreme left of Italy, that choice had to be supported in spite of the strong opposition on the part of communists and socialists. To support this position, he mentioned the fact that that treaty Italy had just signed was a defensive treaty. Its aim was not to wage wars on others, as the communist propaganda continuously said at the time. But he also said that that agreement was the prerequisite for Italians to aim at our real aim that we should all have ahead of us, which is that of the European Union. And these are things that he clearly said. So he used the words European Union back in 1949. Having seen how history has since then developed, this was really amazing. He had a great capacity of foreseeing the future. He had a clear vision of what was about to happen in our country. On the other front, there was an interesting speech made by Giancarlo Pajetta, an authoritative representative of the then Italian Communist Party. This is also to be heard at the exhibition. And Giancarlo Pajetta instead supported his stance of rejecting Italy's entering the NATO. And he then remembered that on the occasion of the parliamentary debate in the Italian parliament on whether Italy should join or not join the NATO, he and the socialists, the communists and the socialists voted against Italy's joining the NATO, and they left the assembly by singing the Internazionale. So this clearly gives you an idea of how polarized the political situation was in Italy in those years, and at the same time it shows how the vision of a leader like Alcide De Gasperi, how far-sighted and wise it was. This is justified by the fact that in the future, first the socialists and after them the communists started in a way supporting back the Western views. They too in a way embraced this vision of Italy joining the NATO, and after that joining the then European Economic Community. In the 1960s, socialists became part of the government, and therefore they agreed on all international commitments that Italy had signed up to then. And then, after about 10 years, Enrico Berlinguer, who was the leader of the most important Western Communist Party, once declared that he felt himself safer under the NATO than under the Warsaw Pact. It was 1979, and since then, foreign policy and domestic policy went hand in hand, started going hand in hand, and this in tangible forms. So it is always worth remembering that the two started going hand in hand because they started sharing the same views and the same objectives. They gave the Italian foreign policy so to say cross-cutting legitimacy from the left to the right wings of parliament, which over time would be termed bipartisan legitimacy, in order to give credibility and support to Italy's actions in Europe and in the world. There's one simple thing to say. When it came to basic decisions, first of all, the decision to join the NATO first and then to join the EEC afterwards, over the last 45 years, we basically shared the same visions. Basically, all Italian political forces basically shared the same objectives. Of course, some opinions were differences. However, the very basics and the basic and background objectives, as well as the long-term strategies, were shared by the center-right and the center-left parties. And in our opinion, in my opinion, this was a positive element. And now I'd like to start speaking very freely, if Mr. Bernardini allows me. So talking about freedom and talking and behaving freely, I'd like to get rid of my tie. There was a basic element of solidarity between the center-right and the center-left of Italy. And that has been a supporting element over the last 40 years. Will this always be the case in Italy? Well, this should not be taken for granted, especially today when we see that there is a movement, a third movement, compared to the center-right and center-left, which is the Five-Star Movement, which appears to have ideas on our foreign policies which are not at all in line with the ones we have worked on, we've quite successfully worked on over the last 5 years. So the Five-Star Movement is very much critical of the single currency, and as a matter of fact, they would like to abolish the euro in Italy. They are very critical against Europe, although they have not clearly stated what their alternative objectives are, and they have not taken a precise and clear-cut stance vis-à-vis Italy being part of the NATO. In other words, there is a very important part of our political representatives that do not share the decisions shared by Italy's parties. So we'll see what's happened. This is, however, an element that should be taken into account. Also, if we are to stimulate growth, if we manage to have growth, actually, I think, frankly speaking, I doubt that the movement will grow substantially. There's another thing I'd like to say, talking about the 70 years of our republic, which is what we might term the object of our foreign policy. What is a foreign policy that is useful for its country for? What needs and what objectives does it serve? Actually, it serves the protection and the promotion of the national interest. This is something very deeply rooted that goes beyond the alternating powers, the alternating parties at power. There are strategic objectives that are far beyond a given economic moment or a given political party. We as Italians find it quite easy to define what our national interests are. First of all, our interest is to guarantee stability in Europe and in the Mediterranean. We play a major role here, and so we have a priority interest in the fact that the world surrounding us is and remains stable. We also have an undeniable, clear interest in the fact that the world we live in is safe, where individuals, households, families, companies, the state and the states can develop in the best way possible, and that they can progress in the best way possible. So there is a safety need. The Romans used to say primum vivere. We first need to have the necessary conditions to live, and only after that can we talk about philosophy. Given the way in which we are in Italy, we also have another important interest in the fact that our markets are open. We don't want to have our markets hampered by custom duties, tariff blocks. Ours is a producing, manufacturing and processing country as well as an exporting country, and therefore we need a market around us which should be open and free and not too much conditioned, and at the same time very competitive, only in competition. In spite of the fact that there can be internal distortions of the competitions, in a system of competition we've always shown that we can be very good. We also have another very strong interest in communicating with cultures that are different from ours. Italy is not a country that has an imperial past like many other European countries. Italy doesn't in a way, induce others to think that we might have hidden programs. We have an inborn ability to deal with countries and this on an equal footing, showing the counterpart that we can act on an equal footing and on reciprocal terms, thereby guaranteeing a fruitful dialogue. We also have another important interest in the fact that the world around us, especially those countries which belonged to what used to be called the developing world in the past, what is now termed the emerging world. The more this world can emerge, the bigger the balance, and the better we are able to eliminate any tensions that might derive from huge gaps in development. So we are interested in the fact that development policies go on, proceed, and are enhanced, exactly as stated by the United Nations with their objectives. And furthermore, we have another objective, which is the fact we have an interest in the fact that our communities in the world play an active and increasingly recognized role. Not only and not so much by limiting, confining ourselves in simply exercising the right of vote abroad that has been taking place for some years now, so that we tend to remember these Italians living in the United States, Australia, or South America only when there are elections in Italy, because we are reminded of the fact that 12 or 6 parliamentarians are elected by Italians. Cultural roots that have led them to settle elsewhere. So in other words, that's a part of Italy that can also play a useful role in promoting international cooperation. These preliminary remarks have led me to discuss the current situation. When analyzing the 70 years of the Italian Republic, completely separated periods of time. There's a first period of time from 1946, so the year of the foundation of the Italian Republic, up to 1989, which was the date of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then there's a second period from 1989 to date. And what's the difference between these two periods of time? There is a very deep difference in the description of these two periods. If we had colors at our disposal, the first phase could be colored in blue and the second in red, or the other way around. In other words, we're talking about two different worlds, two periods of time characterized by ways of conceiving foreign policy, the foreign policy in a completely different way. Before 1989, you probably all know, or most of you will know, that the world was characterized by an unwritten duopoly with Russia and the United States. In other words, there was a tacit agreement based on the so-called balance of terror, and each of the two blocks, so the Western bloc led by the United States and the Eastern bloc led by the then USSR, had lots of weapons, mass destruction weapons, and they're very effective possessing these arms and the possibility of using them against any prevarications on the part of the other bloc would pose a risk, because that was some kind of a switch that was easy to turn on, but at the same time that was also the prerequisite of a situation of balance. Fortunately enough, nobody was crazy enough, neither in Moscow nor in Washington. So that switch was never turned on, and therefore the world remained stable and in balance, even if at a price, especially for the people under the power of the Soviet Union, in the Soviet Union and in its satellite countries. The countries that were under the Warsaw Pact. This system has been stable, was stable for 45 years and held for 45 years. However, this system abruptly changed completely on the 9th of November 1989. Up to that moment, political analysts were used to read the Pravda, the most important newspaper of the USSR Communist Party, that kept on repeating the same things, that kept on giving the same news. The experts of the policy of the Kremlin were specialized in saying whether the editorials of Pravda contained the word tuttavia, which is to say yet, in a given line of the article, because if the word appeared in a given line rather than in the other, that would have implied a repercussion in the West. So this may be a joke, but it was just to say that the world was quite immobile from that point of view. So this world disappeared in November 89. The Berlin Wall fell. There was the disruption and the collapse of the USSR. National states came back. They demanded, and soon obtained, to be autonomous from the power of Moscow. Another unthinkable event was the fact that Germany reunified, and this peacefully, without using any weapon. The world changed, and also Italy's position changed. Up to 1989, Italy had been an ally that had joined the NATO, who was trustworthy and disciplined, a country that had contributed to some crucial operations. Just let me mention two, just to give you an example. The decision at the beginning of the 1980s of deploying Euro missiles to defend the West against the military offensive from Russia at the time, that was decisive. Italy's decision to deploy its arms was decisive. staying engaged up to 2006, when our presence was reinforced in, so to say, a buffer. The world had changed. Of course, we were a borderland, and therefore, as a borderland, we had been, in a way, cuddled by our American ally, because we were practically the outpost, had been the outpost before the fall of the Berlin Wall. But this changed in '89, and soon after the fall of the Berlin Wall, an acute personality, Beniamino Andreatta, who was Minister for the Defense and then Italian Minister for Foreign Affairs, remarked that if it had been enough for a country like Italy to belong to the NATO, to have its role recognized, then from 1989 onwards, Italy's membership in the NATO would have been no longer enough. Italy would have had to show its qualified presence and its ability to submit proposals for initiatives and then implement these initiatives also in contexts that were not in line with the decisions and the opinions of the rest of the NATO.
Abbiamo sempre scontato.
In this situation, Italy has always paid a price to be a great country, of course, a great people, but finally a medium-sized power. Italy is not a nuclear power. Italy has no permanent seat at the Security Council of the UN, unlike France and the United Kingdom. So Italy is a medium country, so to say. A few days ago, President Amato, and I acknowledge his copyright of what I'm about to repeat. I know he cannot repeat it because he's already been here at the Rimini meeting, but he quite playfully stated the following, that he's an expert of medium things, as his shoes are 40 and a half as a size. So this is why he's able to understand what the meaning of an average power is. And Italy is a sort of an average power, a country which, in order to be appreciated, must make efforts. Italy must say something substantial, because in other cases, if a country is a superpower, of course, they do not need to be particularly creative, and Italy was indeed. Italy was creative. If we consider the 27 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, well, it is possible to see things that were inspired by the farsightedness of the Italian foreign policy. Clearly, and I will not dwell upon this, clearly the world today is a globalized world. It is more interdependent than it was in the past, a world which is seeing the emergence of new countries that had marginal positions only 10 years ago. Just think about the emerging economies, India, Brazil, South Africa, China. Think about them one generation ago, but 20, 25 years ago, they were placed, they were set aside in a marginal place in the world, whereas now they have global agendas and they have a say in today's challenges. So there was a multiplication of entities, of countries in the international scene outside the borders of Italy and within our borders. several subjects have started to have a say in foreign policy. Foreign policy is no longer something which has to do with the national governments, non-governmental organizations, associations, individuals, associations for human rights, the press. All these stakeholders now have a say. Religious associations, they all now have a say in foreign policy. We have multiple subjects bringing a new richness to the overall foreign policy. If soon after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we thought for just a moment with prestigious analysts and historians that the world would become flatter or simpler, well, we were wrong, because the world has not become simpler or more consistent. On the contrary, we are now living in a world in which frictions and unfortunately wars have been multiplying. All this has a background which should be taken into account, namely demography. Demography is not a topic which is dealt with as often as it should, but we need to bear in mind that today over 7 billion people live on the earth, and in 2050, when the majority of you will still have a chance to participate in the Rimini meeting, and me and Mr. Bernardini will probably have other occupations, the planet will be inhabited by 9.7 billion people. So over a period of 100 years, which is a very short period in the history of mankind, the world's population will have increased by 4 times. And this has never happened. Such a speeding up, such as a demographic multiplication and growth has never occurred in the history of mankind. So I would only like to add another element. We need to bear in mind that the ratio of the populations among the continent will change. Europe accounted for 21% of the population in the past. In 1950, Africa accounted for 9% of the population. In 10 years' time, it will account for 18% of the population. So there will be an increase in the population of other continents. So if this is the world which is about to come, and I'm drawing to the conclusions, so what are the challenges for today? Well, I would like to focus on the key issue. The challenge today is the one which is also the title of this year's meeting. You are good for me. So the challenge is that of recognizing the reasons, the prevailing reasons, which should convince us to live and to coexist with the others, instead of increasing and fueling clashes. I'm talking about Europe, first of all. I think that many of those who have dealt with foreign policy over the last 10 years should be aware of the fact that Italy's future, Italy's destiny, has to be seen as a common destiny of the entire Europe. We've had some successes, we've had some problems, some trouble, especially over the last few years. However, there is no reason for dissatisfaction to let us forget the extraordinary success of an operation which has no precedence in the history of the world. I'm referring to the European integration. Many countries are envious about the achievements of the European integration. In many countries, people and the governments are striving to build a better future for their populations. And I believe, above all, that the foundation of this project is a series of reasons which should not be considered as outdated. The reasons that existed at the beginning of our European adventure are still valid today. Of course, they should be revisited, they should be updated. Yet, I never forget a very beautiful sentence by Helmut Kohl. When in Germany, the public opinion was very worried about the introduction of the euro. And Kohl was asked, why do you really want to abandon the Deutsche Mark, the German mark, the currency which had been the pillar of stability and trust and the economy in Germany? Why do you want to join this new single currency, a weird single currency with no government? Kohl answered, I want the euro because my brother died during the Second World War. Well, it is an outstanding sentence because it gives you the idea of how profound were the reasons of those who had experienced the Second World War and of those people, of those decision makers who knew very well that wars can burst in places you would never expect. Think about the war in the Balkans in the 1990s. So Kohl understood that the single currency would be the symbol of the European Union, and it was considered as the strongest antidote to situations that could not be managed. Although the public opinion in Germany was very skeptical about the introduction of the euro. So what is Europe today? We must not forget that Europe is the first trading power in the world. Europe is a continent or a country, if you like, where we have a concept, a welfare scheme, which is an example for many other countries. Europe is a continent which still attracts migrants, and this is easy to be seen every day. Europe is a continent which, if managed to be one single state at the Olympic Games instead of 28 different states, well, it will win the highest number of medals. So to mention and to quote other important politicians, I would like to quote Helmut Schmidt. He once said, those who have a vision should go to a good ophthalmologist. Of course, he was joking because he indeed had a view, he had a vision for Europe, and we should be determined to relaunch the European integration and to relaunch our common values. And then we may deal with the economic, financial aspects, or we may deal with the regulation of some elements which are seemingly superfluous. But all these topics rank second. What really matters is to stick to our pathway so that all the European countries can go along together. And even more so today, as we are experiencing quite a difficult era. I am very glad, and I am also confident about the fact that from this afternoon's meeting in Ventotene, which is a mythical, an iconic place for Europe, thanks to the Manifesto of Ventotene written by Spinelli, well, I am confident that from this kind of meeting, it will be possible to have a new impetus for Europe. We're not going to listen to any outstanding or extraordinary announcement, but it may be the start of a reaction. It may be the start of a process which takes into account the fact that Europe is indeed experiencing a period of crisis, but we must be aware of the fact that Europe cannot afford losing bits, as we saw with the decision of the United Kingdom to exit the European Union. The so-called Brexit is, should not be underestimated. And I wouldn't like to end this conference with some concerns, but it's honest for me to say that the Brexit is really a hard blow for Europe. Europe loses an important part of itself, namely England, a part which links us with the Anglo-Saxon world. Over the last 40 years, we did everything we could to have Great Britain remain with the European Union. Great Britain has never been an easy partner. I worked for several years in Brussels, and we always had the impression that our friends from the UK almost had one foot outside the door of the car, trying to curb or trying to to pull the brake of our voyage, so to say, while we were trying to move forward with European integration. Well, England has decided to exit the European Union, and I think that the procedure, the method chosen was quite unusual. As a European citizen, I can tell you that in the aftermath of the results of the referendum on the Brexit, a referendum which determined the exit of the United Kingdom, we realized that our good friends from the UK had not even considered the possibility of really exiting the European Union, and this is even more certain because they had not thought about the possible consequences, and they had not thought about a possible strategy in case of Brexit. And the winners of the referendum, in the aftermath of the referendum, decided to resign. We are lucky enough that this did not happen in Italy. I would like to give you a practical remark. We talk about relaunching Europe and going back to the founding values of Europe. But we should consider how Europe was made hitherto, up to the present days. How did we build the free circulation, free movement of goods, of people, of citizens, whereby it is possible for a student to go to one of the countries of the European Union to study and then get back to his homeland to work. This was feasible thanks to the so-called community method, which regulates the functioning of a society or an association, so to say, in which the members all agree to be part of the association, and they agree that they will accept a decision even though they do not agree. This is what happens in a family. This is what happens within a condo or within a society. There's a community method. Of course, unanimity is not always feasible. But of course, the majority decides for all. So if you do not agree, you will say that you do not agree, but you will not oppose. This is a community method. We must be careful, because what is at stake at this stage is the threat to the strength of the European Union. So we could weaken the European Union institutions. The European Commission should make proposals as the treaties determine. It should propose measures which are substantially in the interests of the condo, of the community. A good manager of the condo, but with the power to propose. So we need to preserve this method. The alternative to this method which is catching on, which has been catching on since the start of the crisis of the global economy. The alternative is the intergovernmental method, which means that the states organize their consensus according to their national weight, thereby creating blocks which depend on their vested interests. In this case, we have national interests. We don't have community interests. This creates lack of confidence, vetoes. Well, it is a blockade. It is a stalemate for the integration process. When you hear somebody talking about intergovernmental method, well, stop and reflect. We should all reflect about this. And then we should also try not to reach that point. Just a couple of words to conclude my lecture, because I think we're running out of time. Foreign policy is a series of decisions, of actions, programs, initiatives, which affect us more and more. Foreign policy is no longer something exoteric or considered far away from us all. Suffice it to think about what's happening in the Mediterranean, and you can understand how foreign policy is close to our everyday lives. We have a fire ring, as the experts define it. We have a fire ring before the coasts of Italy, going from the Maghreb countries to the Mediterranean, to Syria, Afghanistan, etc. In this fire ring, Italy is strongly engaged in, well, at several sectors, a political sector, in terms of stabilization of the situation, in terms of creating and fostering a dialogue with the neighboring countries, even bearing in mind the illusion of the so-called Arab Springs. So several years ago, we all hoped that the Maghreb countries would start a totally new period, but with the exception of Tunisia, we realized that this process was really difficult, slow, and leading to very contradictory results. In several countries there were coup d'etat, and we should think about Egypt. And we still have a problem due to the lack of information and lack of clarity when it comes to the case of Giulio Regeni. We have Libya. Libya is now a sort of a bankrupt state, which is very concerning for us as Italians, because Libya lies in front of the Italian coasts, and this situation produces instability and geostrategical risks for Italy. Think about Syria, think about Iraq. The images of the last few days are really devastating. It's a mechanism, it's a situation which nobody seems to be able to settle. So there's quite a large area of instability. The Italian foreign policy over the last few years has focused on preferring the diplomatic instrument, negotiations and dialogue, instead of resorting, as some countries have resorted, the instrument or the decision to go and bomb. Why should we bomb? Who should we bomb and why? It is not true that Italy does not play a major role when it comes to its foreign policy. The opposite is true. We carry out vocational training for the armed forces. We contribute to military operations which are very important in Iraq, for instance. Italy is participating in some operations in Libya. It is not true that Italy is shy or frightful. It is true that Italy is a wise country, and justly so. Italy is wise and wise when it comes to the possible use of strength, of force, because we learned a lesson, considering what happened in Libya after 2011, where a use of the military force unfortunately led to the worsening of the situation instead of solving it. And solving the situation is in the interests of the country itself, but also of the neighboring countries. 2017 is going to be a new year. Italy will have the presidency of the G7 meeting. Italy will be a non-permanent member of the Council of Security Council of the UN. And Italy will celebrate the 60th anniversary of the signature of the Treaty of Rome. Next March, the Treaties of Rome will celebrate their 70th anniversary. And this may well authorize us to hope in a far-sighted foreign policy on the part of Italy. But to do this, we need something which other countries have. Well, what we need is stability. We need a stable government. It may be a good government or a government which is probably not so good, but we should vote for the government and it should stay there for 5 years. It should be allowed to work and to carry out a foreign policy. This is the interest of Italy and the interest of the neighboring country. So to answer now to Bernardini's question, you are a good for me. Well, this is certainly a logo that could be implemented and applied to the foreign policy of countries such as Italy, countries which want to defend their own interests, determined to bring forward initiatives, but also countries, a country which is always ready to continue negotiating and continuing to dialogue with the others.
Thank you, Ambassador Valensise. Thanks for this thorough analysis. You've really explained the world to us in your analysis. Now I'd like to leave room to some students who have questions. I know there are students who've prepared some questions for the ambassador. Please introduce yourselves and tell us where you study. Good afternoon. My name is Elisabetta and I study philosophy. Thank you. I would like to ask you how much of the decisions of internal policy in the first period you mentioned was influenced by international balance and also determined by external interventions? This is a very smart question. Congratulations. Very good question. Well, my answer is going to be very easy. We believe that those foreign policy decisions were strongly influenced by internal forces. In other words, there was an internal motivation that then led us to be part of the NATO and not of the Warsaw Pact. Soon after the war, this is well illustrated by the exhibition, by the way. The first period I was mentioning is well illustrated by the exhibition. So after the 18th of April 1948, Mr. De Gasperi won the elections. He, in a way, got rid of the radical communists. He didn't want to have them in his government. He opted in favor of the Western North Atlantic Pact because he could profit by the collaboration that was necessary between 45 and 48 to have the country start again. So this mutual influence between the two types of policies, foreign and internal policies, is very evident. It is clear. And this to the satisfaction of those who were in government and with an opposition that was very fierce. Those who were in the opposition party didn't feel themselves represented. But I would like to insist on a point today. That is to say that De Gasperi was right, and it's not me who's telling this. It was the very same critics of De Gasperi of the time who said that. First the Socialist Party, and then the very same Communist Party. The Communist Party underwent a thorough transition that laid the foundations for us to overcome the symbol of communism and this communist ideology that basically led the Communist Party to adopt a more social democratic stance. All of this was accompanied by an explicit recognition and acknowledgement of the far-sightedness of De Gasperi's decisions in the soon after the end of the Second World War. Thank you. My name is Martina. I studied history at the Statale University. Statale University in Milan. So I'd like to start from the exhibition. There's a video in which Mr. De Gasperi talked at the Paris conference in 1946. He addressed the other countries, especially the countries that won the war, and he started by saying that, and I quote, "I feel that everything except from your personal quotas is against me." End of quote. So I was very much struck by the way in which he approached the other countries. Italy was not well considered because Italy had lost the war. And in spite of this, Mr. De Gasperi insisted on his arguments. I think that today this courage is not so much present. That courage basically stemmed from the ideals. Do you think this is true? And if this is true, do you think what do you think the reasons are? I was also very much struck. Besides the speech by De Gasperi, also the two following speeches by the remark made by Pietro Nenni, the then secretary of the Italian Socialist Party. He talked about the anti-fascists had to take on the responsibility of the errors of the war and dictatorship. And then Ambassador Sforza. Many people have probably do not remember who he is, but those who know him actually know how important he was. And basically he told us that he and the president of the Italian Republic signed the peace treaty fully aware of the fact that that was a problem. That was accepting something that at the beginning was not in line with what we were proposed. So basically, we were at the time entering treaties with our enemies, with countries that were in the war our enemies. So those moments must have been really difficult and painful for the Italian political leaders. The sentence you mentioned by De Gasperi, pronounced at the Paris conference, which is a beautiful sentence. So that sentence well reflects the climate that Italy was acting in on the occasion of that conference. Italy had been invited at the conference, but it played a minor role. And Italy was participating at that peace conference where other countries were deciding what should have to be done and how the future structure would have been. So the role of Italy on that occasion was really very difficult. And even more difficult from a political point of view and also from a human point of view was also the role of the Italian representatives, as shown by the sentence by Sforza. They were representing a defeated Italy. None of them had contributed to the defeat of that Italy. All of them thought that the defeat of Italy was the responsibility of those of other people who had come before them, but they had to pay the price for this defeat. So that was a tragic situation, well reflected by the Gasperi sentence, and well shown, probably even better shown by the witness borne by Sforza, showed to me by Massimo Bernardini. The foreign minister, Mr. Sforza, explained that he signed that treaty. There was so much against the interests of Italy. Italy lost part of its area, part of its territory, islands, and so on. So it paid a high price for having been defeated the war. But that war was not the responsibility of De Gasperi, of Nenni, of Sforza. All of these people, however, all the new political leaders had opposed the war. So, of course, it takes courage. And then it also takes far-sightedness. The Italian foreign policy in 1946 had an objective, that of laying the foundations in order for Italy to start from scratch. Italy had a price to price. It was a very high price. We paid that price, and things went as we've seen. But actually, the images of people from Istria or the corpses from the Foibe was a very negative image. It is devastating today, and it was even more so after a few years from the moment in which these events took place, in those former territories of Italy, in Istria. We really hope that Italy's leaders, political leaders, have the same far-sightedness and courage. Not only Italians, actually, Europeans, I would say, because we all need this kind of courage. My name's Gabriele. I studied history in Milan. I have a question. I was very much struck by a passage of the video that you mentioned at the beginning, a passage pronounced by De Gasperi when soon after Italy joined the NATO, when he said that Italy's joining the Atlantic Pact was basically due to a realistic view of the time, and that the European Union, however, was up in our interests and thoughts. This struck me a lot, because today we have accomplished the European project, and yet the European Union is posed with great difficulties, big difficulties. So my question is, what do you think can help Europe fulfill its interests, especially for us young people? This is my first question. And then I have a second question. As the Italian Republic and the European project have more or less started in the same way, do you think that the livelihood of the Italian Republic can go hand in hand in Italy's deep determination in joining the European project? Well, I have no golden recipe to help Europe gain momentum again. I know that Europe has done lots of good things for us Italians and for Europeans in general. If we were to be tangible and realistic on how we can proceed, I think we should point at growth and work. Europe should be seen as a great opportunity of growth and employment, especially in this situation, in this moment, because we are undergoing an unprecedented crisis that's been going on for 8 years with unemployment rates that are skyrocketing, and they are unsustainable for a country like Italy and other countries as well. So our leaders have to have the capacity to show us the enormous opportunities for growth and employment that can be offered by Europe. This can be done by investments, by the deployment of resources with adequate plans. Just to give you an example, over the last few months there was the so-called Juncker plan that appeared to be at the basis of the relaunch of infrastructures in Europe. Of course, if you build infrastructures, then a lot of related activities can be started. Unfortunately, that plan has remained on paper. So first, we need growth, employment, and work. Second, we need safety. This is a period characterized by uncertainty, fear. Europe has to be able to show that through its know-how, its organization, and through its strength, also military strength, it can guarantee European citizens an adequate level of safety. Safety is a condition sine qua non in our countries and our cities. So we have to show our citizens that Europe means safety. And how can this be done? Much has been said, for example, of the protection of Europe's external borders. Very well, we should reinforce Europe's capacities of protecting its external borders as Europe and not as Italy or any other member state. We should reinforce its capacity of protecting its borders, rescuing those in need, but also spotting those who have illegal intentions. So, first objective, work. Second objective, safety. Third objective, we have to explain our citizens that Europe is perfectly capable of managing with openness and balance at the same time the migration issue. The migration flows. Migration flows cannot be a problem only for Italy and Greece, and that the Czech Republic or Ireland deny to be affected by this issue. The poor people who escape their countries, who flee their countries, risking their lives on boats in the Mediterranean, they don't want to come to Italy or Greece or Ireland. They have Europe in front of us, in front of them. So there too, there was a rule, the balanced distribution of flows in Europe. And then, unfortunately, we as Europeans have not been able to transform this intention, to turn these intentions into practice by equally distributing these people in each member state, by taking care of integrating them in a balanced and smart way, thereby managing a phenomenon that has to be managed rationally and not emotionally. What strikes me from this point of view is that the European Union is sometimes opposed, very fiercely opposed, especially by the very same people who then lament the fact that Europe is not doing anything for its external borders. So we have to find one way. There are some sectors of the Italian political life, their representatives also sit in parliament. On the one hand, they oppose Europe because they don't like Europe, and then they oppose the fact that Europe doesn't have enough resources to protect their own external borders. So we have to make a decision, either one way or the other. We should be more consistent. There's a last question. Good afternoon. My name's Marco. I study political sciences in Milan. I would like to ask you if you could make some tangible examples experienced by you in your career in which it was possible to document the genius of the Republic. For example, I would suggest Lebanon and Sarajevo, two places where you worked. This is a tricky question. This is a very tricky question. Fortunately, it is at the end of the meeting, because otherwise one would be tempted to talk about things that shouldn't be addressed. Allow me to talk about an episode that immediately comes to my mind. How old are you, by the way? You're 23 years old. So, at the time, you were only 4 years old, so you probably didn't experience that. In July 1997, I was working in Sarajevo. And Sarajevo at the time was quite precarious. I was living in a home, in a building, and I had been told that I was privileged because that was the only house in town with glasses on the windows. All the other houses had rubber cloths, so to say, to avoid weapons. So one day, Director Muti came to Sarajevo and he wanted to organize a concert for peace in Sarajevo, thereby inviting all those who had waged war with one against the other. I thought that was a splendid idea, but I also told him that he needed someone to organize that concert. He immediately said, "Well, I've already found this person. It's you," he answered. So this you was me. And actually, he insisted on me to organize the concert. So Director Muti was very firm, and we had to organize the concert. We did that in a sports palace used for basketball. It was quite difficult, and there were groups who came to see the concert, groups without weapons, groups that had fought up to some weeks before. They came in a spirit of reconciliation and unification through music. So Muti at the beginning considered this concert as one of the many concerts that a great director like his does in the world. And actually, I dared telling him that was going to be a very special concert. I told him that these people would have followed him. He made a wonderful concert. He saw that there was a big feedback from the audience, and he then decided for a bis. Quite smarty, he decided to play the choir of Nabucco. He started playing then, and on the note of Nabucco, and I'm sorry, after so many years, I think I'm going to be touched. On those notes, the audience, made of people who had fought each other for many years, stood up. Almost all of them stood up, and they started singing in Italian the choir of Nabucco. And that really was touching, not only for myself, but also for Maestro Muti. I'm telling you this, first of all, because I then met him after some years, asking him if he remembered that, and he did remember that event. And I'm telling you this also because working in the Balkans, working in Sarajevo, taught us that while we knew very little of them, at the beginning, we even found it difficult to understand what the capitals of the countries of the former Yugoslavia were. The Bosnians, especially the Bosnians, and especially the citizens of Sarajevo, they knew everything of us. They knew everything. And this is really impressive and touching at the same time. And I think we should really build a lot on this in Italy and in Europe. Thank you, Ambassador Valensise. Thanks also for this personal note. Thanks for closing on such a personal tone. By the way, I was part of that trip of friendship, and I was one of the journalists who reported on this event, and I remember something unique. I have to remind you that the fundraising campaign of the meeting goes on. Encouraged by the positive experience of last year, we would like to kindly ask you all to continue the meeting, that it goes beyond this 37th edition. So in the halls, in any hall, you will find lots of stands where you can donate. And donations have to take place only in these stands that are easily recognizable. Thank you. Thank you once again to Ambassador Valensise. And now, let us continue this pathway of the Rimini meeting, and let us continue visiting the exhibition that we are illustrating to you. We're really commenting on the fact that the encounter with the other is the genius of the Republic. Thank you.